Hello, everyone. My name is Stephen Gack. I'm a senior at University of Minnesota in the food science school. I, Today I'm going to show you how to make lefse and eggnog. I was a pastry chef for about 12 years. The other 6 years I was just a regular chef, and I started making lefse probably not too long ago. It was actually about 5 years ago when I moved back to Minnesota. And this is my interpretation. So if your grandma says something different, she's probably right. So listen to grandma. So first of all, I'm going to show you some of the equipment that we need. Some of it'll make your life easier, but it's not necessarily crucial to have. But first, a KitchenAid mixer or a handheld mixer with a paddle attachment is ideal. Next, this is called a ricer. There's also a food mills, but basically it's a way to take your cooked potato and kind of mash it, and it basically prevents any lumps. So lumps, they're kind of like the enemy of lefse. So if you have lumpy chunks of potato in your dough, it tends to tear when you roll it. So a ricer or a food mill is your best bet. If you do not have one of those, if you just have a fine mesh sieve, and then like a bowl scraper, or you could even use like a sour cream lid, but you'll just put your cooked potato in here and just kind of mash it through. The next piece of equipment, actually this one's always great if you do any type of baking or cooking at home. Just a cheap digital scale is going to be your best friend. Get rid of those measuring scoops and cups. This will be a lot more accurate. So next, you'll want a lefse rolling pin, and this is it's called a sock, right? Or a sock or a cover, and it basically just kind of makes your life a little bit easier if you have one. But there's all these little grooves and lefse pins, and kind of grabs onto the dough. It helps to get it nice and thin. But the sock or cover will prevent the dough from getting stuck in there. Next, you have a lefse. This you call a flipping stick or a lefse stick. There's not much flour in lefse, and the dough is pretty delicate. So this, and I'll show you in a little bit, is crucial. You'll have to have this to make lefse. It'll help you get your lefse off the counter and onto your little flat top griddle, which is what I'll show you next. This Gretchen's mom was nice enough to let us borrow this for the demonstration, but it's just nice. It gets really hot, up to 500 degrees. Tends to not have anything stick, and there's no big edges, so you can use your lefse stick to apply your lefse and to pull it off. So, and then last but not least, this is gonna be very good. It's a like kind of lefse rolling board, and there's little guides. There's kind of ratios to how much your dough weighs or the volume, and to how far out to roll it. This isn't completely necessary, but it prevents your lefse from sticking. If you don't have one, like a good measurement to go by would be about 1 millimeter thick, your lefse. So, okay, with that being said, I guess we can start making lefse. So last night I roasted. I prefer to roast my potatoes or bake my potatoes. You can also peel them and boil them. I just feel like roasting them gives them a better flavor. So what I'll do is I'll just take russets. You want a real starchy potato like an Idaho russet, and I usually wash them off, cover them in like a canola oil or vegetable oil, and then sprinkle them with kosher salt, put them on a baking sheet, and then bake them for about 350 degrees for about an hour. And it's very, very important that your potatoes are cooked all the way through. You do not want little chunks of undercooked potato. And like I said, the other option, which a lot of people do, is they'll just peel them, boil them, and then rice them. If you are roasting them, you do want to peel the skin off before you pass them through your ricer, and it's kind of a nice little treat to eat salty potato skins while you're making lefse. So, like I said before, this was made last night. It's just roasted potato that we food milled, and you're just going to put it right into your mixer. And then next, I like to turn on the mixer, and you're going to do everything on low speed for this. This is quite a bit of dough for this small mixer. I didn't really account for that. So we're going to be careful, but we're also kind of missing the first few gears on this KitchenAid, so if stuff goes everywhere, it's not my fault. Like that. Okay. Alright, so we have our potatoes in our KitchenAid. It is a pretty big recipe for this size KitchenAid, so luckily we found a little cover that kind of helps your potato from flying everywhere while you're mixing. So basically just kind of want to lightly break up the potato. And next, we're going to stream in our melted butter. So it doesn't need to be super, super hot or anything like that, just basically a liquid state. And we just want to make sure it doesn't clump up and we don't get any butter chunks, because like I said before, any kind of lump is the enemy for lefse. So I'm going to turn this on and just gradually stream this in. All right. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to add our heavy cream, and don't skimp on the heavy cream. I wouldn't go with milk or half and half. Definitely go for that full fat heavy cream. It's not that much, and kind of live a little on the holidays and eat fatty food. So just like with the butter, I'm going to turn on the mixer and I'm going to stream in the cream as it's mixing. Next thing you're going to want to do is you have your AP flour, and then you have your, I have my salt and my sugar combined, and we can just kind of add these all together. And we're just going to dump these in all at once. Definitely don't dump this in while your KitchenAid is on. Dump it in with everything off. And then I believe the instructions say mix till homogeneous, and basically what I mean by that is just make sure that everything is incorporated, that you don't have any kind of like butter chunks or flour like stuck on the side. It should just look like one uniform mass of like thick mashed potatoes. So one thing you're going to want to look for is, as you're kind of mixing all that in, just kind of peek down the sides of the bowl, and basically when you see that there's no residual flour kind of left down on the bottom of the bowl, you're getting really close. So always like to do one stop and scrape, is what we call it. So you're just going to, shut off your mixer, kind of lift it up. It's a little bit challenging with this. All right, we're good. So we have the guard off, and I'm gonna basically, we call it stop and scrape. So this is a bowl scraper. There's a million different versions of these. It's just kind of like a flimsy plastic, and we call it a pastry card. And we just use it to scrape the bowls and kind of handle the dough. You can get them at a variety of cooking supply stores. So I just kind of want to scrape down the sides and just make sure that that flour and any of that dairy is going to be mixed into the actual dough. So there we go. And that is done mixing. So we don't want to overmix. If you overmix potatoes, they have a tendency to become gluey and paste-like. So we're just going to kind of avoid that. We just want to mix just enough for the dough to come together. So the next step is I like to take out the dough onto a surface and just kind of give it a few kneads. Just kind of get it to come together. So as I was saying before, it should kind of look just like really thick mashed potatoes. So from here, the next step, you're going to bring your digital scale back into play. And what I like to do is just weigh out and portion all my dough at once. So usually in professional kitchens, we try to do each step at a time. So instead of me weighing out a 4-ounce ball and then rolling it, and then weighing out a 4-ounce ball and rolling it, we're just going to divide it all up into 4-ounce balls. Do that all, and then we're going to come back and we're just going to have a rolling party. So as you can see, it kind of looks like a nice smooth potato dough right now, and that's what you're going for. I'm just going to roll out a couple of these, or just to scale them out. So this 4-ounce weight is usually the Lefses I make, it's about 4-ounce weight, and I'll roll them out, and they'll probably be about a 12-inch diameter. So it's kind of like a, in my opinion, a good like personal size Lefse, but you can obviously make them bigger or smaller, whatever you like. So once I get the dough portion, just kind of roll around in your hand again, kind of try to get it back to being smooth, and then you can kind of form it into almost like a little burger. So at this point, we can either chill the dough for a little bit, maybe an hour, and then bring it back out and roll it, or this can be kind of done the night before and pulled out the next morning and rolled. So You can kind of do things ahead of time, and here we go. So I'm going to roll all these out and get them portioned, and then we're going to come back and show you how to roll. So here are some patties I made last night, and just kind of let them come to temperature. It does tend to be a little easier to roll if they're on the cold side. So like I said before, the dough is very delicate and there's not much gluten. So if they're a little more on the chilled side, it might be a little more forgiving. So don't be afraid of flour. Flour is your friend. There's definitely such thing as too little flour. On very rare occasions, there's too much flour. If there's too much flour, when I'm saying that, it's after you roll it, your lefse is still caked in dried flour. You can use a pastry brush and brush off the excess flour. But it's a lot easier to do that than try to scrape dough out of your rolling cloth or your rolling pin. So the first few times you do this, definitely don't be shy with the flour. So, and then you can kind of get a feel for what works best for you. So the first thing I want to do is take your Lefse rolling pin with the sock or the cover, and I'm just using all-purpose flour, the same flour that I used to put into the dough, and just kind of working the flour into the sock. Okay. Your bowl scraper comes in handy, again here, while you're dealing with the flour. You can use a bench knife as well. It's just like kind of like a metal version of this. But if you don't want flour all over yourself or the floor, I would suggest kind of cleaning up after yourself each time. So, next, we're going to work flour into our pastry cloth. So just sprinkle it on there. Just kind of work it in. I'm going to show you how to do one on the pastry cloth, and then I'll show you how to do one without the pastry cloth, because I don't have one of these at home. This is Gretchen's mom's as well, so she was nice enough to let us use it. But we'll also show you how to do it without one and not lose your mind while you do it. Okay, so we're going to grab our lefse dough. Cover it pretty decent with flour. A little more. So when I was taught to use a rolling pin in school, seems like a pretty simple thing to do, but there's a lot of ways to mess up as you're rolling, whether you're rolling pie dough or lefse. So what I was taught is I was always taught to start in the middle of the dough and roll forward. And it's really important that when you're rolling forward, that your motion is up. So when you're rolling forward and you're using the same pressure, people have a tendency to make the edge of the dough a lot thinner than what the middle is. So basically like so. And then you'll keep your dough nice and even, because when you turn it this way, those kind of raised edges will get knocked down. But I'm always starting in the middle and either working back or working forward. So as you can see, the the flour kind of starts to disappear off the top, okay? And we just want to gradually keep adding a little bit of flour to make sure that doesn't stick to our pin. And I don't know if you can tell this on the video, but I'm being extremely delicate. Like, you're basically letting the weight of the roller, of the pin, kind of do the rolling. I'm not applying any pressure whatsoever. That'll be another trick to not having dough stick to your roller, or you don't really need to work it hard like a cold pie dough. So just be very delicate. All right, and it doesn't have to be perfect. Just do the best you can do. Obviously, you don't want to go any larger than the size of your cooking vessel. So I think we're at a good point. It's definitely about 1 millimeter thick. We'll see it here in a second if it actually sticks or not. So maybe we can get a zoom in of this, but this is the Lefse stick. Is actually tapered, so it smooths down on both sides here. It's nice and thin at the tip, and this is designed so you can get underneath the Lefse and just kind of basically prevents you from tearing it with your fingers. So what I like to do is sometimes I'll put a little bit of extra flour on the side here where I'm going to go to pick it up. And I kind of like to get a little ridge of flour and then just work very carefully, very delicately. You don't know if it's stuck or not, so right there, we went all the way through. So I like to do a first like a release, make sure it's going to release first. And then from there, should I go right into cooking? Okay. So have your board nearby, your griddle. A trick here is we're basically going to stick our Lefse stick under here, get it in the middle, and we're going to pick it up. So it's kind of going to be draped over both sides. And the trick is you want to keep this part parallel with your board. You don't want to pick the Lefse up like this, because that is a lot of gravity or pressure right there, and you could tear your Lefse in half. So we're going to kind of do what we did before, where we're going to kind of delicately slide it in the middle, and we're going to pick it up like so. We're going to drop one side, and then we're just going to roll our stick. And don't cut it like I did. There you go. So our griddle needs to be fairly hot. So anywhere from like 400 to 500. We're trying to get these little like brown blisters on the dough. So color is a personal preference, so you can have like really light colored char, or you can go really dark. It's all up to you. But we need to have our grill hot because we want to get some color on the outside, but we don't want to take so long that the inside dries out. So we don't want a lower temperature griddle. It's going to take longer to brown. It's going to dry out. So you'll start to see it kind of puff. So the moisture in the actual dough is going to start to create these little bubbles, and that's a good thing. If you get really huge bubbles, you can pop them, but I just kind of leave them, and those usually get a little bit darker than everything else, and those are the bits that I like. So as you're cooking your Lefse, you're going to want to just kind of peek under the sides of it and see how we have a little bit of golden brown there. That's a good indicator that we're going to want to flip this lefse. So same technique, flip it over and roll the dough. So like, as you can see, like as long as your pan is hot, like 400 plus, you know, it's gonna take anywhere from, I would say 30 seconds to 90 seconds, just to get that color. And then once you flip it, it's gonna go even quicker. So these are pretty thin. So we're just gonna kind of do the same thing, just kind of peek under the side and see. Just basically look for that color. So if you've ever made tortillas at home, you know, after they're done, this is what it kind of reminds me of, is a tortilla, like that color. But basically you just scoop them off and put them on a pan, and then we can cover them with like a rag, like a dish towel, and then kind of do all your cooking at once, and then boom, you have 5 or 6 lefse. So, all right, so we're looking pretty good. We'll kind of go the same technique that we've been doing. Kind of get inside, lift it up. There we go. We have our lefse. Okay, so that was rolling lefse with the rolling cloth. So if you don't have one of these at home, like I don't either, it's a little bit trickier when you're doing it on the counter. So obviously you're going to want to go on a surface that's very flat. Granite, marble, it's great. So the first thing you're going to want to do is take a couple tablespoons of flour, and you're just going to kind of, like in a flicking motion, you're just going to get it across your board or your rolling surface. And you're going to need even more flour than you would if you were using your board. So same dough, pull it up, cover it really well with flour, kind of pre-shape it to a circle. Okay. Use our same pin with our cover on it. Just make sure there's a little extra flour on it. Same technique as before, but we're going to stop a lot more frequently this time and make sure our lefse is not sticking. So, and when I say frequently, probably like every 4 strokes. So once again, just come back with your stick. Get a little flour kind of built up on one side. And just kind of like a lightly little sawing motion. Just make sure it's not stuck. You can pick up your dough. Get a little flour under there. And then come back and kind of repeat the process. So if you're rolling without a pastry cloth, you're probably definitely going to have excess flour on your lefse. So once we get done rolling this, we're just going to go back and we're going to take a pastry brush and brush off any excess. I'll show you how to do that. This is when we're going to brush off. So most of the flour that's going to be caked on here is probably going to be around the underneath, around the edge. So we're going to take our pastry scraper, and I'm just going to kind of run one little corner underneath my dough. And just kind of scoop this excess flour to the side. So we're going to flip this over. So that's why I'm putting a little bit extra flour on the top. So as you can see, you have to be a lot more delicate and you have to have a lot more patience if you don't have one of these. So we're actually looking pretty good on this side in terms of flour. So we are good to bake this. Okay, so next we're going to show you how to make eggnog. So there are, kind of like Lefse, there's a million different ways to do it. Whatever way you like best, that's the one you use. So traditionally, it is made a lot of times without with raw yolks and raw egg whites. So there is I guess a danger aspect to that. So today, instead of using raw yolks and raw whites, we're going to cook our eggnog base, very similar if you've ever made ice cream base or creme anglaise. That's going to be the first step of this eggnog. So the equipment you need about a saucepan about this size, a little smaller would work as well. You're going to need a bowl, and usually I use a ladle, but we're going to use a measuring cup today. This is going to be for our egg yolks. We're going to set up an ice bath, so we're going to pretend that this is full of ice, and this is our container that we're going to dump in our hot eggnog base into. So in terms of food safety, we just want to make sure we cook that mixture down really quickly to avoid any kind of microbial growth. And next, we're going to need a whisk, a rubber spatula, and then your ingredients. So we're going to start off with about 500 grams of whole milk. Next, we're going to, I think it's around 240, 250 grams of heavy cream. I can't remember exactly. Next is our sugar. So I think in the instructions I originally have half of your sugar in here and then the other half for your meringue. So I'm going to make a little adjustment. We're going to put about a third of our sugar into this dairy mixture. And then we're going to save another third for our yolks, and then we're going to save the last third for our whites later on. So when you're heating up dairy, especially milk, if you add your sugar in there before you apply the heat, you usually have better chances of not scorching the bottom of your pot. So just make sure you add your sugar to the pot before you start your heat. There we go. So you're going to want to turn this on about medium to medium high heat. Another trick is if you have a gas range at home, it's very important that when you turn your flame on, you do not want the flame coming up the sides of your pot, okay? That's going to kind of scorch things up on the side. So whenever you're adjusting your heat, make sure that nothing's kind of coming over the side. So, all right. We're going to add our spices to our dairy. So it's going to steep our spices as we're cooking our ice cream base. So I have a mixture of nutmeg and cinnamon. I tend to buy my cinnamon ground just for convenience purposes, but our nutmeg we always buy whole. So if you can afford it, or if you can find it, the fresh nutmeg looks like so. And I just put mine in a spice grinder or a coffee grinder and grind it up fine and add that. But it's going to taste a lot better if it's whole. One more thing I forgot to mention. This is optional, but traditionally, my wife did a little survey on Facebook last night, and it seems to be that the Midwest likes to put brandy in their eggnog. I guess this kind of changes regionally. It's like other places we live, there's a lot of bourbon. Also seen like different liqueurs like Grand Marnier and Tawaka. I've even seen like white tequila, like Blanco tequila. You don't need any of that, so it's up to you. If you don't want to add any kind of alcohol to it, you can always add like vanilla extract, almond extract, any kind of flavoring you want. And nutmeg seems to be the staple spice of eggnog, and then everything else is kind of what you want to do. I've seen allspice, I've seen clove. I prefer nutmeg and cinnamon, and my nutmeg is always it's a 2-to-1 ratio to cinnamon, so 2 parts nutmeg, 1 part cinnamon. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is the medium-high heat, and we're going to bring it up to a scald. We say that in the pastry world a lot, a scald. So usually it's about 160, 165. You can kind of notice it when it starts to steam a little bit. It's a good indicator that you're at a scald. So we're bringing the heat up. I don't want to throw too much misinformation to you, but in the chef land we give a lot of food science misinformation, but we were told that bringing it up to 165 is primarily, so your final temperature once you add the eggs is about 170, so the closer you can get to that by bringing this up, the quicker your eggnog is going to cook. I've also been told it's to help denature some of the proteins. So yeah, don't be too impatient. Don't turn your heat all the way up if you're in a hurry. It's just going to cause a lot of issues later. So I do like to kind of keep the mixture moving slightly. It's not too crucial at this point, but I just don't want any of the spices to settle to the bottom and potentially scorch as well. So as this is coming up, you're going to want to take your 4 yolks and you're going to want to put them in your, basically a bowl that's large enough to hold half of this liquid. So this bowl is a little overkill, but it's the only one I could find. So another little pastry trick is whenever you're dealing with yolks and sugar with like ice cream base or custard, you're going to want to add your sugar to your yolks at the very last minute, right before you're ready to mix your hot dairy. once again, I don't want to give you too much misinformation, but the sugar will start to, it's very hygroscopic, so it'll start to absorb some of the water in the yolks, and you'll kind of get this like chunky looking, like cooked, like curdled yolk mixture. So just to avoid that, don't add it to the last minute. So normally when we do this in the kitchen, we kind of do it by eye and by feel, but to kind of take some of the guesswork out of it, and while you're still kind of learning the process, a nice thermometer will help you out a lot. So the final temperature of our base is, we want it to be about 170. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this hot liquid and we're going to temper some of this hot liquid into the egg mixture. So what we're doing is we're gradually bringing the heat up in the yolk mixture by adding a little bit of our hot liquid at a time. So obviously you don't want to go all that hot liquid at once, you're going to have scrambled eggs. So we call that tempering. So you can, I don't know if you can see, but I have the steam kind of coming up off the top of my pot. So at this point, I'm going to take part of the sugar that I mentioned earlier. We're just going to mix it in there. So the sugar, in cooking land, and this might be misinformation as well, but the sugar kind of insulates the yolks and it kind of gives you a little extra breathing room or a safety net, so you're less likely to curdle them. Now, if that's true, I'm not 100% sure. Alright, so I'm going to turn the heat off on my pot, and I'm going to get my yolk sugar mixture right next to my bowl. So I'm going to whisk that sugar into my yolk. And I'm going to take a little bit of my hot liquid, and when I say a little bit, I'm probably maybe like a couple tablespoons. And you're just going to add a little bit at a time. And just gradually bring the temperature of the yolks up. So a good, safe amount tempering this is once you get about half of your hot dairy into your yolk mixture, it's a safe bet that you can kind of add the yolk mixture all back at once. So now that we've added about half of it, yolk in there. Okay. All right, so now that our mixture's back in there, we're going to get our thermometer ready. I use a brand called Thermapen. So if you're really into cooking, I highly recommend this. It's very accurate. I've had this for about 6 years and it's stayed calibrated for the whole time. So now we're going to take our heat and we're probably going to go a little closer to medium heat. We just want to have more control as we bring this mixture up to 170 degrees. So 160 works for a lot of people as well. I just like to go 170. If feel like you get a little thicker on glaze. So you're going to take the Tim and I'm only at 140 right now, so I'm just going to kind of take my thermometer out of the liquid so I can stir it nice and evenly. But I basically like to run my spatula around the perimeter like 2 times and then kind of come back through the middle like a zigzag. So I'm kind of doing this methodically, and I'm just basically keeping the whole mixture moving, so we're not going to get any kind of scrambled eggs in one spot. So on the sides, and my spatula is touching the bottom of the pot, so it's almost like I'm scraping the bottom of the pot. But just keep this moving, and then periodically you can kind of dip your thermometer back in there. So we're going to cook this. After you've done this for a while, you can actually feel the consistency, the viscosity of the anglaise get thicker, and that's how we do it by eye. But you can actually visually and like with your hand, you can feel the, like, I guess the proteins starting to coagulate and thicken, and we call it nappe. It's a French term. It means like to coat the back of a spoon. So if you were to lift this product up on a spoon and take your finger through it, it'll hold its shape, but it's a little deceiving with the rubber spatula. Another little trick, or I guess a common error when people are doing this, is don't touch your thermometer to the bottom of the pot. It seems like a no-brainer, but it happens to a lot of people where they're actually picking up the temperature from the metal pot and not the liquid. So just make sure you don't do that. So I usually like to make ice cream base, custard base. I always make it the night before, the day before I use it. They tell us in school, in culinary school, that it helps the flavors marry, and I'm sure there's a lot of other food science reasons behind that as well in terms of proteins. But I always like to make it the day before, and then the day of, there's really 2 options you can do. The first and the safest is you take this base out of the cooler or out of the refrigerator, and you just make a whipped cream, like a sweetened whipped cream, and then you can fold that into your eggnog base. The other route you can go is you can make a meringue and fold that into this base the day you're ready to serve it. A couple little variations. My wife is from Wisconsin, and her family makes their own maple syrup, so she likes to make eggnog with maple syrup in it and bourbon, so it's pretty good. But today we'll show you how to make a Swiss meringue. There's 3 basic meringues you usually make in the pastry land. That's French meringue, which I'm sure everyone's done in food science class. Then there's something called a Swiss meringue, which is what we'll do today. That's basically heating up egg yolk or egg whites and sugar in a bowl to about 130 degrees, and then you transfer that to a mixer, whip it on high till you get soft peaks, and you kind of turn it down to medium and stabilize the meringue and kind of let it come to room temperature before you fold it in. And then the last technique is an Italian meringue, which we typically use those for a lot of mousses and things like that. So you really have to pay attention to this and kind of babysit it, because once you get close to 160, everything's going to happen really quickly. And it's really important that you have all your equipment ready to go. It's kind of like working in the lab. You can't just run to the other side of the lab and grab equipment and all these other things. You want it all ready to go. So we want our ice bath right in front of us, ready to go, so that way when our base is ready, we can pour it right in there to stop the cooking so we don't get scrambled eggs. So I say your base or your bread is not going to wait for you. So if anyone has any immunocompromised people in their family, I would highly recommend a lot of the grocery store now. You can get pasteurized yolks, pasteurized whites, or just pasteurized whole eggs now even, just to be safe.
How's it going?
We're just about there. Like technically I could take it off right now, it's at 160, but
yeah,
I'll show you the one I made last night. The 170 is so much thicker. I like to have it thicker, and then that way I can always thin it out.
Oh yeah.
So, you know, I like thick eggnog, my wife likes thinner eggnog, so like I'd rather have it thicker and we can just adjust it and everybody can be happy. So, and the ways to thin it down, like you can add just milk, you know, that'd be the healthiest.
Yeah.
You can always add heavy cream, but and like if you're not using any alcohol, obviously you're gonna have to add that liquid in by weight in some manner. Otherwise it'll be really thick.
Do you like store-bought eggnog?
Yeah, I don't mind it.
It's so different.
I'll definitely zhuzh it up a little bit with fresh spices and things like that. But yeah, it's funny, like being chefs for 20 years, you always get people like assume like we make everything from scratch and like and like we don't like processed food, and it's like that's all a lie. Like we love Kraft mac and cheese. You know, we'll eat McDonald's. The best meal is, we always say the best meal is the one you don't have to cook for yourself. So when you cook all day, every day, like if you go over to the in-laws and they're really self-conscious about serving you their food, and it's like, I don't have to make it, this is great.
Yeah.
So, about 168, and it's going to be hard to tell on camera, but it's definitely thickened up. And I have a batch I did last night that you can see how thick it gets when it's chilled overnight. So whenever you're making a base with eggs like this, you're always going to want to pass it through a strainer right into your ice bath, okay? This is just going to be a safety net in case you have like egg chunks in there or whatnot. They won't be in your final product. This is going to also grab some of the spices out of there, which is fine because the smaller ones have gone through and it looks pretty in the final product, but we got a lot of that flavor out of there. So the next thing, if you want to, like I said before, it's optional. I'm just adding a little bit of brandy, 80 grams. If you do not want to add any alcohol, just make sure you're probably gonna need to thin out your eggnog with milk. And just make sure you kind of add that same weight of the alcohol. All right, so when dairy is cooling, it likes to form a skin. So the surface of your hot dairy, if you do not cover it, you're going to get this like weird yellow coagulated skin on the top. So I think in the instructions I have something that says cover directly with plastic wrap. So this is what I mean by that. So you're just going to want to get a piece of plastic wrap or saran wrap and not just put it over the top, but you're actually going to want to press it down so it's touching the surface of your eggnog. And it's going to cool this way. So if you do that, you won't get any skin. And this is like anytime you're cooking dairy and yolks. So I usually like to take my ice bath and put it in the fridge just to help it cool down even quicker. So do that the night before or the day before. You could actually even do it probably 2 or 3 days before if you wanted. And just let that sit in your refrigerator until you're ready. And we'll come back and show you how to make a Swiss meringue and finish your eggnog. All right, now we're going to finish our eggnog. So like I mentioned before, you can finish it with whipped cream or you can finish it with meringue. The important thing is in that recipe, remember how we divided up our sugar? We just need to make sure whatever process we go, we make sure to get all that sugar in the recipe back into the eggnog. So we're going to make a Swiss meringue today. I have a KitchenAid bowl over a bain-marie, so I just have a little bit of liquid in the bottom of this pot. And it's just probably at like 160, 175 degrees, just so it's steaming. But it's just going to heat up our egg whites and our sugar. So pour them both in there. It's very important when you're whipping egg whites that you don't have any fat or any kind of oil on your whisk or on your bowl, or somehow get it in there. So basically, any kind of fat will not really allow you to get the proper volume and foam on your egg white. So I'm just using the actual whisk attachment from the KitchenAid just to kind of keep this egg white mixture moving. And we want to get it to about 130, 125 degrees. And the most important part of this step is dissolve the sugar completely in the egg white. So when we go to whip, or whip on our KitchenAid, or whisk, whether we're doing heavy cream or we're doing a meringue, we only want to go to soft peaks. We don't want to go any stiffer than that, okay? Otherwise, it's going to be like drinking a milkshake in terms of consistency. So you can use a thermometer, but it's such a little amount of egg white. What I usually do is I'll stick my clean finger in there, feel how hot it is, and also feel for any granulated sugar that is still not dissolved. So this still has a little ways to go. The other important thing is if you don't have a pot small enough for your mixing bowl, you can kind of cheat by putting a little rag here. It'll kind of keep your bowl from not touching the hot water in here. You could also do a French meringue. That's the easiest thing to do. I just kind of wanted to show you a different meringue. So there's a lot of debate in the cooking world on which Italian, Swiss, or French meringue is the best. And I don't know if this is true or not, but people tend to think that the Italian meringue is the most stable, and followed by Swiss and French. So when I say stable, not as likely to deflate. So more likely to hold on to all that air that you trap inside of it. So technically, since we're only taking these whites up to about 130 degrees, there is still a chance to get sick from them. So, like I said, if you're feeding this to your grandparents, you may want to go with the whipped cream route. So our sugar is dissolved. I'm just going to bring up the heat a little bit more. And then when we go to whip this, I'm going to turn the mixer on fairly high, and we're going to get close to soft peaks. And once we get close to soft peaks, I'm going to turn down the mixer to medium, and that's just going to kind of help stabilize the meringue and just help cool it off. So we want it to be about room temperature when we pull it off the mixer. So when I say soft peaks, we have soft peaks, medium peaks, and stiff peaks. So if you've ever been a Dairy Queen and the little top of the, once they dispense the ice cream, the little top of the ice cream kind of curls back down like a little hook. Okay, so that would be soft peaks. If you pull it off and it's, I'll show you once you do it, but when you pull it off and it's totally horizontal, the point, that means you're at medium peak. If you pull it off and your peak is sticking straight up, that means you have stiff peak. It'll make a lot more sense once I show you. Okay, so we're getting pretty hot here. So I'm going to transfer it to the mixer. And start whipping. So I'm just going to check on my meringue. Of course I went to stiff peaks. That was good. So I'll show you how not to do it. So this little point sticking straight up means I went to stiff peaks. So that went from 0 to 60 really quick. So it's not the worst thing in the world. I'll show you a little trick to kind of bring it back. So we're just going to take a little bit of our base that we made last night, and instead of folding it in right away, we're just going to pour some of the liquid in, and we're going to deflate our meringue a little bit. So curve down a little bit below soft paint smell. So here we go, it'll work. So the next part of the process is, you'll hear this a lot when you're making pastry, is folding. So folding whipped cream, folding meringue, folding, I don't know, quite a bit of things. So what we mean by that is we're going to have our base that we made last night, and we're going to have it in the bowl. And this base has a very different consistency as our meringue. So the first thing we want to do is, we call it like a sacrifice. So we're going to take a third of our foamed mixture, whether it be meringue or whipped cream, and we're just going to add a third to our eggnog base. And we're just going to whip that into it, okay? We're not going to fold. What we're doing is we're trying to bring the two consistencies closer together. So when we go to fold in the rest of a meringue, we're not going to get too many lumps or anything like that. So always sacrifice about a third of your meringue or your whipped cream whenever you're folding. So the next process is the folding. So I'll show you that. So we're just going to add all of our meringue mixture. And at this point, we do not need our whisk anymore, just our spatula. So from here, we're just going to take our spatula and we're going to go in folding motions, okay? And I like to keep my hand stationary, and I just like to move my bowl. Okay, so the whole point of doing this is to maintain some of that aeration that you added with the meringue. And if you have a few little chunks in there, it's not the end of the world. You just kind of get them on the side of the bowl. So the next thing you want to do is you want to taste it. So you might not like it as sweet. Your roommate or your significant other might like a little sweeter. So at this point you can add maple syrup, you can add milk. Basically get it to the consistency you want and the flavor you want. And then there's a million different garnishes you can do online. I like to microplane some fresh nutmeg on the top, or you can do a little sprinkle of cinnamon. Some people put the little, I think they're like pirouette like cookies, hollow straw cookies. I don't know, check out Martha Stewart, she's the best. So my personal preference from here, I would take some whole milk and thin this out a touch. And there you go. There you go, the eggnog. So time to garnish our lefse. So there's a million different ways to do this as well. Traditionally, I think a lot of people just like to brush it with butter. At that point, some people go to like a cinnamon sugar mixture. Brown sugar is very popular. Even do savory applications, you know, like instead of a hot dog bun, you could use this. But one of my favorites is, I like to take a Norwegian cheese. It's called Gjetost, and this is kind of what it looks like in the store. They take the byproduct of a goat cheese, and they take the whey, and they reduce it down from a ratio of 11 to 1. So As it gets reduced, they fortify it with a little bit of cream, and they continue to reduce this whey and the cream until it gets to like the consistency of almost like a bread dough. And then they form it into these blocks. But like the best thing I could describe the flavor of this as would be if you mix like caramel with cream cheese. So kind of like caramelized cream cheese. So I like to take a microplane and just kind of just shave this cheese all over the top. And don't be stingy. This is, if you love cheese, you'll love this. Alright, so next, just like to take like a little bit of blueberry jam or blueberry preserves. I think you can get this at any store here in town. Next, I just like to take a little bit of sour cream. You could use creme fraiche, cork, yeah, pretty much yogurt, like a thick, like Greek yogurt. Just kind of add little dollops. And then the last thing I like to add is a little bit of fresh thyme. So it might seem a little odd, but people don't put enough herbs and spices on desserts, I think. So it kind of adds a little floral note. It goes really well with the cheese and the blueberries. There we go. So I've seen people fold this into, fold it in half and then fold it again, kind of like a crepe. I believe, I'm not 100% sure, but traditionally they like to roll this up. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so. And then once you have it rolled up, you gotta add a little bit more cheese to it. And then a little bit more. A little bit more sour cream. And a little bit more jam. And there you go. So this is a little bit of different version. It's very versatile dough, so you can pretty much do whatever you want with it. I feel like it goes with everything. So just have a little fun and empty out your refrigerator. Put whatever you want on it. So I hope you enjoyed the demo and hope you have a happy holiday. Thank you.